In this episode of the Encounter Report, 4 sinners have much to confess for their involvement in Tales of Berseria. There's Axelrod, your humble narrator who failed the Geoboard license exam, as well as Crayson, our venerable random encounter marathon runner. Also joining the roster is BGG02, the anti-grinding specialist who formerly went by the name Background Guy 02, and Drimezan, our cackling competitor who has a laugh so infectious even the game characters couldn't resist. Each person played the game blind on the PlayStation 4, and the only thing left to say is,
"Come, sinner, and repent your wicked deeds."
We're opening up with battle types, and we've got some very extreme numbers present. BGG02 and myself make up the middle of the pack, even if the times differ by large amounts. The real crazy numbers, though, are Crayson and Drimezan. They both represent opposite ends of the encounter spectrum, and their journey to get to the end of the game was a true experience to catalog. Something that really caught my eye was BGG02 and Drimezan's inability to die. While they had multiple characters die in encounters, they never once got a game over. Of all the stats that I've recorded, I found this one to be one of the most exciting ones. Dying in RPGs is so common, but true skill was exhibited here, so salute to you two. Next up are battle locations. Once again, the times prove to be notable in that the distribution is both so similar, yet completely different. Drimezan and myself spent nearly the same amount of time in world map encounters, but she has more than 4 hours in dungeons. Crayson and BGG02 effectively mirror each other on all accounts for their times, but BGG02 doubles his numbers in dungeon and world map encounters. In combat types, we at last see the true excellence that is this iteration of the Encounter Report. As mentioned in the battle types, Drimezan and Crayson represent the opposite ends of the spectrum here. Drimezan effectively fought every encounter that was available in the game and only skipped encounters in 6 locations, which amounted to around 50 encounters or less to ballpark it. On Crayson's side, he started skipping encounters about 7 hours into his playthrough, but it became a significant thing starting in his first visit to the Empyrean's throne. It wouldn't be unreasonable to say that every encounter Crayson didn't fight, Drimezan did. It would only be fair to add 995 more encounters to his run metric, right? Subtypes are the next category to enter the fray, and there's a few things I found fascinating about these numbers. The first is that nobody grinded. The second is linked encounters, or dangerous encounters as they're called in the game. BGG02 and myself quickly uncovered the greatness that was associated with them, and went out of our way to fight them. That did result in 5 dire foes for BGG02 and 4 for myself, but that didn't deter us. Crayson essentially only found himself in linked encounters by accident and in turn encountered no dire foes to everyone's surprise. Drimezan avoided linked encounters like the plague, which became even more of a mindset after meeting her first dire foe. While her curiosity did eventually win out and more linked fights were had later in the game, she never pursued them with great interest. The other stat is advantage encounters. I didn't have the foresight to track my own, but I did so for everyone else, and the result was that 29% of Drimezan's encounters were advantage ones. Considering that she fought more than 1,000 encounters, I thought this was extremely impressive, even more so because she never had a single back attack or risky encounter as it's called in the game. Notable locations get a little spicy, so let's start off with Baird Marsh. This location was special for essentially one reason only: the failed Oscar boss fight. Aside from BGG02 and Drimezan, who shook it off like it was nothing, Crayson and myself struggled greatly. I clocked in 25 minutes and change in all my attempts with 2 game overs and 25 individual party member deaths. Crayson spent 22 minutes with 3 game overs as well as 25 individual party member deaths. But here's the heat. I played the game on release while everyone else later on. I started playing in early 2017, Crayson in mid-2019, BGG02 in late 2019, and Drimezan in late 2019. I say this because when you compare the levels of the bosses I fought to everyone else, there's a discrepancy. Larry and Teresa and Failed Oscar are 2 back-to-back fights in Baird Marsh and were level 52 and 54 respectively for my playthrough, with my party level being 42 to 44. Those bosses for everyone else were 44 and 45 respectively, with their levels ranging from 46 to 50, with Crayson being level 34. So, for some reason, my iteration of the bosses were 8 to 9 levels higher than everyone else. Mount Killerhouse is the second to last dungeon and was relatively innocuous. Everyone, including Drimezan, avoided encounters here to some degree, and overall, it was just a lengthy dungeon with 2 insignificant boss fights. With that said, the discrepancy in boss levels continues for this dungeon, but maybe not in the trend we would all expect. In Baird Marsh, Crayson, BGG02, and Dreimzan's bosses were level 44 and 45. For Mount Killerhouse, Shigure was level 54 and Demi Melchior was level 56, with everyone's party ranging from 54 to 57 and Crayson at 45. My party was level 52 to 53 and Shigure was level 43, while Demi Melchior was level 44. For clarity, my bosses dropped 9 and 10 levels, while everyone else had their bosses increase by 10 and 11 levels. In Anomanat, the final dungeon, the narrative shifts. The dungeon is massive and everyone skips hordes of encounters. I strolled in and immediately knew I didn't want to fight whatever this dungeon was. I bypassed nearly every encounter and rushed my way as fast as anyone could in that maze of a dungeon to the final boss. And it turned out that they were no challenge at all, with the bosses at level 52 for both Artorias and Anomanat, as well as the Armatized Artorias encounter. They proved no match for me as I crushed them in 7 minutes 47 seconds with 0 character deaths across the entire dungeon. Despite avoiding as many encounters as possible, Crayson encountered his most difficult dungeon thus far. The maze managed to send him in places I never even knew existed, to the point where he fought 2 optional bosses I had never seen. On one of those bosses, he had a crushing defeat after having spent 18 minutes 44 seconds on it. But that didn't deter him, as he moved on to the final boss, who was a staggering level 65. Despite being severely underleveled, he only died twice to the final boss, but at the price of 64 individual character deaths on those final 2 fights. In fact, for the Phase 2 portion of the fight, his party members died a staggering 46 times over the course of 32 minutes 51 seconds. And yet, Crayson did what he does best, and won with all odds against him. Of everyone tackling the game for what appears to be normal boss levels, BGG02 felt little to no concern. Despite the maze of a dungeon sending him all over, he had very little trouble. He was brave enough to fight multiple linked encounters as well as completely demolish a dire foe. In fact, he too managed to find 2 optional bosses and defeated them both with little resistance. When he finally reached a level 65 boss, he came out victorious in a combined 12 minutes 24 seconds, and I'll have you know, no grinding was necessary. Unsurprising to all of us, Dreimzan spent the most time in the dungeon, almost reaching 3 hours total. With so many encounters under her belt, she certainly had nothing to fear and showed it by fighting multiple linked encounters, although she still ran from the dire foe that showed up. Powered by that small blemish on her record, she too walked up to a level 65 final boss and, being the highest level of everyone else, beat it in a total of 21 minutes 25 seconds. Next up is a new stat that you'll need your reading glasses for: party composition. I wanted to know what characters people latched onto and which characters they didn't seem to like. For Tales of Berseria, it had a 4-person party, so 2 characters had to get the boot. For myself, Aizen and Magilu didn't make the cut, while for Crayson, it was Laphicet and Magilu. For BGG02, Aizen and Rokurou got left home, but it was Eleanor and Aizen for Dreimzan. As crazy as it is, every character, aside from Velvet, was least valued by someone. Aizen, however, takes the unfortunate crown despite the invaluable resurrection spell he had. And to cap it all off, here's the combined stats. As crazy as this sounds, it's a little remarkable that I've managed to clock in 13 more hours in VOD time over BGG02, with 4.5 more hours in encounter time, and somehow that amounts to 50 encounters. Meanwhile, Crayson fights less than 300 encounters and still manages to compete with BGG02 on encounter time. And then there's Dreimzan herself, doing everything in her power to break into the 1000 encounters club and practically double everyone's encounters. Yet despite having 40 to 50 more hours playing the game, she only ends up 3 levels higher than me and 4 levels higher than BGG02. Playthroughs are weird like that. Having said everything that has been said, that's all I got for the Tales of Berseria Encounter Report. I hope you visit everyone's channels and social media to praise them for all this wonderful data. With this report done, I suppose we can finally resolve Rokurou's obsession with a hurricane of deception and not knowing if we're able to see it. Thanks for watching, appreciate it, see you on the next video.